Hi everyone, and welcome to the TBR Webinar series. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for a few more people to join, and then we'll start the webinar. Thanks. We're just going to wait one more minute, and then we'll start on with the webinar. Hi everyone, and welcome to the TBR Webinar series. Today, Vice President Stuart Williams and Senior Analyst Bozhidar will be discussing CS opportunities in the era of AI. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see a series of buttons. From left to right, you can access the slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, and our survey. After the event, you'll receive an email with the replay link as well as a link to other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them via the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the webinar at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us. Here's Stuart to begin with the webinar.
Thank you very much, Kelly, and thank you everyone for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Today is May 23rd, 2018. We are 2 days away from the go live for the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. And it's a ominous event for some, and it's definitely a watershed moment for the industry. And we're happy to be bringing you some of the up-to-date information about the changing opportunity in the CX universe, both from the technology adoption side as well as the services side, what we call digital marketing services, in an era where more and more of the complexity of execution for marketing and advertising and customer experience will be driven by the robots. So with that, let's get into our first slide here. We have a couple of points we're going to address today. Mostly the conversation is going to be around this new wave of AI-powered customer experience platforms that will push more change on marketers, some of whom are already engulfed in waves of previous technology innovation, and it will drive additional technology adoption and consulting opportunities for vendors on the services side. So we're going to really take a look at three key questions here. The first one's about what's the state of adoption for advertising technology, ad tech, and digital marketing services, which providers are winning and which are lagging, and what are the drivers that providers use to increase their opportunity to capture some of the growth that we're going to show to you, and how do these win rates shift in the era of artificial intelligence and AI. So these are really kind of top-of-mind questions for people who are running ad tech and digital marketing services in the industry today. And so let's jump into unpacking some of the research for you. So the first piece really is let's take a look at marketing opportunity, and I want to invite my colleague Bozhidar to join in here and start talking about some of the drivers here. From the orientation to the data, we basically have two charts here. The first one on the top is the market opportunity for the space and the different components that we see that are going to be driving growth in this area. And obviously the publishers on the ad tech side are the ones who are taking the lion's share of the growth in revenue in the space. On the bottom we have platform adoption maturity, which is kind of a bell curve of firms as they move from probably non-adoption through different stages of trialing, learning, testing, adopting, and getting to full scale. And as we see here, more and more firms are moving up to higher and higher stages of maturity when they begin to adopt different parts of the ad tech stack. So we see ad tech is no longer, hasn't been for a while, an option. It's a required reality. Hence all of the anxiety that's going on among brands, among agencies, and among individuals because of the coming GDPR change. I'm sure nearly everyone in our audience today, in the next couple of days, about 50% of their inbox is filled with either policy notifications about privacy changes or requests to confirm that they should still be being on an email outreach list or a subscriber list. So these are big changes that are going on in the industry, but particularly we see continuing kind of long-term drivers that have been at play for a long time. The most important being, when we think about the adoption trends for the enterprise, there's business model changes as more and more of the dollars go from traditional to digital. The change in buyer behavior, people continue to become more and more deeply wired, and that is given rise to the Facebook data privacy issues. Economic factors, how do you get more reach, more personalization at less cost? And obviously, topically today, it's very important, the rise of shifting political regulations and a greater awareness here. In terms of adoption, Boz, you want to talk about some of the key factors that we see driving things on that side?
Sure. I mean, thanks, Stuart, and thanks to everyone for joining us today at the webinar. The drivers are kind of there's some common denominators. So when you think about it, I mean, the technology innovation certainly has been having a positive impact of both startup community, VCs, bigger consultancies, the technology companies themselves really pouring billions of dollars over the last 5 to 7 years essentially into technology innovation. And with a new wave of the AI, it certainly we don't foresee that slowing down anytime soon for that matter. However, from our buyer research, all these technologies is certainly great for the progress of delivering better, faster outcomes, but most of the organizations are still having internal challenges, change management issues, and really around understanding of what technology drives, what are the drivers, what are the outcomes, that can be achieved as a result of using technologies. The fear around using automation and AI-based tools is certainly a big factor as a result of it, of replacing jobs. I mean, we heard today that Accenture came out with formalizing programmatic buying services unit. And if you look at the details around that announcement, it was well spelled out where and how they will be positioning their business model around using on a FTE basis rather than just using a pure services and pure automated services, I should say, for that matter, as much as programmatic enables for that types of offering. They're still using and leverage their workforce bench to have the human interaction and as we talked with Stuart earlier, as like an insurance policy to manage the transparency and around the different buying behavior and whatnot when the different programmatic tools are being used in advertising technology or MarTech stack. So technology innovation is certainly great. It presents great opportunities. There's a lot of proof of concept. That's the majority of the bulk where the opportunities of adoption is. Enterprises are ready to move forward, but vendors need to be able to show transparency and ROI that actually fulfills not just the promise of the marketers, but also fulfills promise to the IT buyer along the way as a result of their way of being involved with it.
Yeah, Boz, I think that those key issues that you called out are really business-related issues and how business takes advantage of the new technology tools. And it's every wave of new technology faces that challenge, and we think that's that kind of cultural adoption, the change management of that, how you help people wrap their heads around the potential of the technology and then to feel confidently change their processes and the skill sets that they have still kind of remains to happen. When we think about change in the industry, we see big shifts with Sir Martin Sorrell, stepping down as the head of WPP, and really an open question as we're just ahead of their corporate meetings. What the future of that firm is going to look like? Is the model of the human-driven, belly-to-belly agency relationship going to continue, or is WPP going to move down the path that was mocked by Martin Sorrell of Publicis of becoming a little bit more technologically enhanced and certainly going down the path of some of the more recent entrants like Accenture, IBM iX, and some of the more advanced agencies of really using technology, driving transparency, and most recently getting into artificial intelligence and machine learning to create measurable outcomes and mass personalization at scale. So this is still a market that, while it is maturing, the opportunity is growing, is still in flux. And big challenges ahead, which means big opportunities for the advisory and consulting firms as well as the agencies on the execution side. Let's talk about some of those market dynamics. Boz, you want to lead us off on this?
Sure. I mean, we kind of touched base on some of those already, but I want to kind of reiterate how we view the market evolving in terms of like what are the milestones of this year, the next couple of years, and all the way up to 2022. And those insights are coming from our digital marketing services market view report that we publish semi-annually. That essentially it looks at where the market is today, but also future looking and projection of how vendors that are actively participating, both on services and on technology side, are able to work together for the better outcomes to the end consumer. So as we talked about, 2018 is certainly a year of change, especially with the GDPR that's around the corner. The overall trends that we have highlighted here are well established around the vendors being able to, they continue to acquire, especially the consultancies being more aggressive with the acquisition spree. We start seeing some of the agencies to pull the trigger on some of consultancy-led engagement and technology acquisitions that are able to beef up their advertising and their analytics capabilities along the way. then kind of as those trends kind of provide a solid foundation for the vendors in terms of services offerings, they are really moving into what's next kind of a wave around where video and voice are starting to emerge today. We think the next couple of years will certainly become a better drivers for better outcomes, faster drivers for better outcomes, I should say. The broad-based adoption of the AI technologies across the omnichannel platforms is certainly where we think will require both technology vendors and services vendors to better collaborate, especially as technology vendors develop platforms that are around omnichannel architecture. So services vendors will need to know how to be better to integrate and also manage from both front, middle, and back office, and demand for greater data interoperability from a technology and services perspective. And by 2022, I know it's kind of like a long shot view of where we believe things are happening. The digital marketing services growth will start like slowing down, more flattening, as a result of market being more mature. Essentially, we call it like a post-digital era. Essentially, that's going to be the table stakes of everything is going to, in terms of marketing and advertising, will be digital. So we probably that whole digital marketing, just the pure marketing done digital world in a sense. But it will be, for the vendors, will be required to be able to execute, to develop and execute and manage we call marketing moment campaigns that are able to enabled by AI. So the broader trend really is, if we've been talking for the last couple of years, data-driven marketing, we believe that shift is going towards AI-enabled campaigns, and that's require a different way of thinking of how you package and price both technology and services from a vendor perspective as those discussions can come forward with the enterprise buyers.
Yeah, Boz, there's two things I want to call out when we think about this kind of timeline of the market dynamics. The first one is really today. We talk about the shift to person-based marketing and advertising, driving that. I mean, we recently published a paper talking about a segment that we call shopper engagement for the advertising space. So we see really two kinds of activity in the consumer space. One is brand advertising, where you're positioning your brand and your brand promise and setting the expectation for the experience. And then there's the interpersonal advertising and marketing and engagement that goes through the rest of the life cycle. And that subsumes a whole bunch of individual steps of advertising, market development, targeting, retargeting, all of the follow-ups and tuning that take place as you go through all the touch points in the omni-channel environment into the website, looking at, shopping cart abandonment or purchase, what's the next upsell, next recommended engagement, the style. This is the engagement cycle we really see as being starting today and growing into a kind of a unique new type of a market segment where you could deliver that either as a platform or you could deliver it as a service, like an agency could pick that up and do it on behalf of their client. It's all to the same end. So it's a kind of an interesting evolution of the market space that we see here, and we think it'll happen in some other areas in the enterprise. The other piece I wanted to talk about is this shift with AI enabling the marketing, the CMO, to take more control of the enterprise as the chief revenue officer, in a sense. Chief customer, chief revenue driver, they will become equal as they're better able to point to the fiscal impact of the next dollar spent. There's a lot of marketers today who would love to make that promise. They're a little hesitant because the tools haven't made all the connections. We think better tooling, better analysis, but also the next generation of applications are going to give you better insights into the play of the omni-channel experience, meaning all channels open all the time, not just, do you do one as a preference or another one as a preference? You kind of have to have all the touch points going all the time. So, these are great dynamics because it speaks to continuing evolution and the need for continuing engagement, training, leveling up of skills in this segment. So we say, the market will remain dynamic and growing for many, many years to come. So let's take a look at the next slide here when we look at the current space among the ad tech providers. And it's obviously dominated by when we look at the total space today, it's dominated by, Google, Facebook, Amazon, to some people's eyes, is still a surprising new and powerful entrant. Criteo, Oath also play key components here, and this is a great mix of both agency-led provisioning and tooling service model, as well as that from what you could call the walled garden providers who are capturing most of the opportunity here. And when we look at this over time, we do see some of these players shifting. The ones you would expect continue to gain share and strength over time. Some of the smaller players will be acquired as the advertising and marketing clouds continue a roll-up of the marketplace. But we see a greater share of some of the service and agencies really kind of getting into this space and making some offerings. Boz hinted at what Accenture is doing today with its announcement. It's unclear whether Accenture would go all in on providing its own ad tech stack or whether it would leverage the ecosystem. And so we have kind of two minds about the value of that. But certainly agencies need to be able to make a decision. Are we going to be a technology provider and wrap services around it for an outcome for a customer, or are we going to just harvest the availability of players in the ecosystem to best serve all of our customers? And that's kind of a strong fork in the road on the services side. And I know before we're going to kind of move right into the next slide where we're going to look at the services landscape. So I wanted to kind of leave that open question for Boz, about the business model and the tech enablement, because AI plays a big role in this.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, in a sense of and going back, we've seen from some of the services organizations, like I said, Accenture today, we've heard services vendors like Deloitte and IBM kind of flirting with the advertising and the media brokerage space through blockchain or other AI-enabled solutions that are hinting where the pressure may come especially for advertising and traditional advertising agencies. But as we think about what AI does and how those consulting-led engagements, the business model is about relationships, agencies is about transactions. So the consultancies will still have to rethink how they go to market around packaging and pricing those solutions, because essentially they just start giving it away, and it's typically a very low margin business. They need to really find an innovative way to really benefit from participating in that space. And we think selling it as a service could be one way to package it, and so they can avoid the race to the bottom scenario, particularly in that space. Or they may use it as a loss leader and really drive bigger, broader consulting or managed services engagements at the end of the day, because they can afford because they have the scale. As we move into the next slide, as we kind of transition into the services, and we kind of look into how that space is evolving and what are the key players and what are some of the key initiatives. We've been tracking the digital marketing services space over the last almost 4 years now, and we certainly have seen an evolution around, especially on the consultancy side, pushing into the advertising horizontally, I should say, into advertising and marketing space, mainly through acquisitions. And at this stage of the game, the clear leaders like IBM and Accenture are certainly they combine the appetite for innovation and with scale, and they're widening the gap with some of the agencies. We've seen some I think Publicis Group is certainly the one that has been a little bit more aggressive into catching up. They've been transforming the operations, streamlining how they go to market, and be a little bit more transparent around that. As Stuart pointed out, WPP is the one that's really coming around the corner with making some changes with the recent exit of Sir Martin Sorrell. But I think they're coming from a position of being strong and scale in the sense of being the largest holding company. So I think they have had a little bit of a longer rope than the other holding companies to afford to be able to battle where the consultancies may be coming up. But we also see other groups like the India-centric vendors really playing and pushing the space, leveraging their low-cost presence and offering managed services, especially in marketing operations, and being the one that able to coming from an entry point from an application service, especially the application development around CX and UX type of capabilities have enabled them to drive faster results for them in sense of digital marketing services space. Other new frontiers such as file-based media content production or media brokerage is certainly offering new entry points for those vendors. Then you have the strategy firms, someone like EY, that's been really changing a lot how they do business and really about going to market through a three-way partnerships, for example, and thinking about their relationship with Adobe and Microsoft and how they're building up skill sets around that and really providing a strong C-suite relationship and pulling the technology partners in that mix along the way. Other SIs that we want to kind of highlight here is Capgemini, certainly someone to pay attention to. They've done a really good job of acquiring and integrating some of their recent acquisitions. Like most recent one I can recall is the Alliance Consulting Group, which gave them a good footprint in both North America and as well as in capabilities like Salesforce Commerce Cloud, as well as SAP Hybris and Magento. And as we heard a couple of years ago, Adobe moved on with the acquisition of Magento. So certainly skill sets that those consultancies will have to beef up sooner rather than later as they like to participate with Adobe in the Experience Cloud ecosystem. So it's a very dynamic partnerships ecosystems, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of acquisition targets, a lot of certainly a lot of new areas that are emerging as a result of those acquisitions, like I mentioned, the media brokerage through blockchain or using file-based content development production services. So there's the space is certainly still growing. The consultancies have started putting roots into that space. That was something new to them 5 years ago, and the agencies are starting to react to some of those threats as well. So you have to think about business model evolution, not just technology implementation, but those two have to go in parallel at speed and at scale at the same time.
And obviously the same issues that are challenging the enterprises with automation, yep, AI, machine learning, algorithmic processes are also going to impact a lot of the business models of the service providers themselves. So there's a huge wave of change that's going to go through the industry, even if they try to keep the relationships the same about how they do their work. And Boz, I know that you do a global delivery benchmark that looks at how firms are actually staffing up and then beginning to use RPA and other tools like AI to get more leverage out of their headcount. To put it one way, it's also cost reduction if you choose to become more efficient. So this is again another issue where we see AI, particularly for this webinar, making a very powerful play inside the organization about optimizing your workforce and optimizing the recommendations you make for your clients. In this case, around where to run campaigns, kind of at marketing operations, marketing excellence to bring to your customers. So let's go into the next slide here, where we're going to start talking about some of our customer research and looking at this challenge of what we're calling kind of marketing in the moment, which is something we've been talking about for a long time. Being able to reach somebody at that moment when they're able to be influenced, right? Somebody has a moment in their day when they're not necessarily task focused, but they may be switching between different functions. They just finished working out, thinking about what they're going to do the rest of the day. That might be a moment to reach out to them on their cell phone or their new Apple Watch, or to reach them on their TV set. Increasingly, talk to them in their car, in their homes through their voice-enabled device. So these are kind of marketing in the moments, and it involves being successful at that level really requires a tremendous amount of insight into the person. So how do you do that without being incredibly creepy and invasive? And it's also at the same time a tremendous amount of insight about what works. Where do you have permission to make suggestions? How far can you build a relationship with that person about making recommendations and using data and intelligence to not only drive what you're trying to sell, but to actually prove to be a good partner, I want to say that, to the consumer, right? So when we think about some of the issues that are going on in this space, we're still at early days, but we can really see a lot of things that people are thinking about from the benefit for advertising technology is really around these AI insights, right? The capacity to do analytics using our data. So data volumes are only going to increase. The need to do data and data integration and have machine learning to make sense out of it, to do marketing in the moment, is going to require the computers to do that. Humans just can't do that at scale. It's too expensive, too slow. And then integration with marketing tech and CRM. So how do you take the flow of these interactions across the omni-channel environment and work people through what we call the customer continuum cycle? It used to be called the funnel, but people, it's like taking laps on a race course, right? People keep going round and around and around. So we call it a continuum of engagement. And so as we see more and more integrations happen, or frankly, acquisitions building up bigger and bigger clouds, those integrations are either going to happen by configuration and integration or by default as the vendors integrate their own suites. Intelligence will increasingly be baked in across all those different areas. And I know we've seen a tremendous amount of announcements in the last couple of years I think we ran through before the seminar today, every single large MarTech vendor and has mentioned their own specific AI or machine learning tools or platforms. Everybody is in the pool. And Boz, what did you call that? The rise of the robots?
The race of the robots.
The race of the robots, sorry.
Yeah, the race of the robots. Yeah, I mean, the AI certainly horizontally is certainly a great feature to have these days, and you must have it. But I think developing vertical-specific AI, I think solutions is for either specific processes or for a specific industry, because vertical can be kind of both ways. If you want to do an AI tool for your Microsoft Office, for example, or you want to do an AI-enabled solution for your healthcare or financial service industry. So one has a more narrow niche application versus the other one is a little bit more broader industry-wide, which require compliance and whatnot, but to be in place. But think about the competition and the race of the robots, as we call it, to help differentiate and where the opportunities might be and who the right partners to be with, and as you go to market, as vendors think about and investing in AI. I want to move on to the next slide, kind of to show some of that data that we've been kind of talking about from our digital marketing services customer research. Essentially, and as Stuart talked a little bit about already the different data sources, but we wanted to kind of confirm with some of the data that shows those data sources and where things are falling. I mean, enterprises use various sources of data, no question about it. We all know about it. But as naturally, kind of like it's just kind of like where historically where the focus has been, majority of the data supports the sales cycle, and that's sort of the disconnect, especially that the AI could enable and to be able to do a better job, that both enterprises and vendors to do a better job to not use data and just in the sales cycle, but also pre-sales and post-sales. Not surprising, the data that's captured in the internal transaction systems really supports the marketing efforts, which really resonates with the CRM usage. Sales activities usually rely on data captured in IT operations. So it's really about data interoperability between IT operations and CRM and pre-sales. It's really that it's a kind of a common enterprise platform. And we know we've seen some vendors coming around and start talking about it for developing an enterprise level platforms that I can stitch front, middle, and back office, and data will become that flow, go back and forth. And everybody's going to live in a perfect world. We know that we talked earlier. There's a lot of challenges along the way that there has to be a lot of hurdles from business processes and transparency and compliance that has to be overcome before any of that can occur. But certainly, looking at where enterprises are using the data today, what types of sources are using data today, kind of shows where some of the foundational revenue opportunities may come up from, as you know, but certainly where the next frontier opportunities, because we think that the data is generated from machines, sensors, or any kind of connected devices really present the next wave of opportunities around for IoT or engineering services types of offerings, and really provide like a conduit for a broader marketing operations and support services for the bigger services and agencies, organizations. And one last piece to highlight here, as we have coded out on the slide, is on the very bottom, weather data. Firms are really missing the opportunity for not using it. We know IBM has made a big bet on the weather data, on the weather company purchase a couple of years ago. Our question here comes to enterprises: is it just not top of mind? If it's not, is the requirement of education or what it is? But we think there's still a lot of opportunity, especially for insurance or banking industries, where I think certainly enterprises and vendors can benefit from using public records or geospatial or weather data in general. Stuart?
Yeah, Boz, I think the top part of this chart speaks to where marketers are at today, which is still kind of really in this idea of mass marketing. They're personalizing, but they're still thinking about it in terms of volume.
Sales, execution. Yeah.
And when we talk about marketing in the moment, that's about understanding the context of your audiences and leads and potential customers and existing customers. You got to know not just kind of how they relate to you at that moment, but what's going on in their lives. And that means using the data that's at the bottom of this chart. So we see this as a bellwether for these types of information. As we see firms move into more marketing in the moment, using these tools, they're going to draw on these and many other type of contextual data sources. They may be community or profession or interest related, but social media data, that's about the communities that you're in. What's going on? What's the tone? How do you tap into that? Geospatial, the where. But there's a tremendous amount of information that's available within the context of geospatial data. It's not just, the lat and long, but what's going on there, the elevation. It might be relevant to your insurance rates, your fire risk. It might be relevant to the business that you're in. So tremendous amount of context that's available there. Obviously, public records are becoming more and more digitized and more openly available for consumption by the machine learning platforms. And obviously, the weather changes every second, right? So, it becomes a foundational element for helping people understand what they should be doing. Even the simple things that Google's trying to do, like with trying to get to your destinations, leave 15 minutes early because it's starting to rain and traffic's slowing down, right? It gives you the why behind the recommendation. And that really is incredibly important in getting buy-in for the advertising and the marketing messages of tomorrow. So we see these are kind of opening salvo kind of data sets that people will begin to consume, but there's a great many other personalized or community-centric data sets that will be applied. Think about the data from, say, Strava with its run tracking, right? Its exercise tracking, where people go and how that's used. Obviously, there have been some transparency issues with that, with military personnel and things like that. But given better data governance and data integration and management, those kinds of tools can be aggregated and used in a beneficial way for people who may want to know, where do I take my kids out in the stroller so that they're not going to get run down by people jogging or on their high-speed scooters or bicycles, right? I think that's really useful if you've got an infant in a stroller. There's just some case studies for stuff like that. And this is all needs to be powered by much greater levels of machine learning and advanced stages of artificial intelligence to help you to drive that benefit. So again, I'd like to thank my colleague Boz for joining me on the presentation today. We coordinated together on the analysis of the space and giving people an update for where things are at. If you have questions, please reach out to us. Our contact information is here on this slide. We're happy to get answers back for folks who may have a longer question. I'd like to leave a couple of minutes here at the end for a Q&A. If anybody would like to answer a question for us, happy to field one right now. I think while we're waiting to see if folks have any questions on the presentation today, Boz, I know that I have a question for you around it. So you talked about the race of the robots, right? Beginning stages, early stages. Are we pre-chasm or on this idea of the hype of robots and AI? I haven't seen any particular flame-out failures of an enterprise that has kind of really publicly shifted a lot of its business to be driven by AI yet. So I would imagine that's the case. But are we months or years away from kind of hitting the chasm with expectations with AI?
Definitely not months. But I'll just take a broader view a little bit, discuss what we see from the broader IT services market, essentially, and which trickles down to marketing as being the one of the key functions and processes in the front end and the funnel of discussing and getting in customers in the door and so forth. So, which I think is very applicable to the marketers along the way. The IT vendors, the IT community is certainly investing, but it's also about in automation on the service delivery. However, changes in the business models are required as we see the engagement model is changing with the expectations set by automation. So, for example, when a vendor discusses the implications that AI provides as a result of when they're delivering services or integrating a new platform and whatnot, the expectations from the customers are that it should cost less. Because while in the past, vendors were able to charge for T&M, time material, and charge billable hours for delivering a product, now, as a result of automation and AI types of tools, enterprises are demanding lower overall price point for the same amount of work because expectations will be done faster. So that's kind of hitting vendors' bottom line, first of all, because they have to invest in reskilling and IP and R&D and so forth, and also top line to an extent because they're not able to ramp up enough of those automation-enabled awards at the pace they have to reskill. And they have to invest in R&D. So they will see the operating expense structure kind of going up. There's a different price point for data architects and architects that can operate and discuss omni-channel kind of architecture and so forth. So we are in a quiet before the storm, if I should say that way. A long way to go to see vendors adopting an automation-enabled P&L that has different structure, different building blocks that are different from traditional kind of borrows from the traditional IT services and traditional software license-based P&L. So it's a hybrid view that we have done some work and we continue to do some research that type of capabilities and how vendors are evolving. And it's not about from where vendors deliver services anymore, but how do they deliver and how they package and price those services. So it's a broader view of where we think the market is from AI and automation-enabled performance. But it's certainly impacting the marketers because those waves are catching up quickly for those functions. That's a long answer to a short question, but certainly it's not a one-size-fits-all answer as well either. So different vendors have to adopt and adjust their pricing and packaging and go to market essentially in order to survive.
Okay, thank you, Boz. And we had one question come in that said it was a question around why blockchain technologies are a better approach in merging with IoT. I think there's a couple of thoughts embedded in that quick question. When we think about blockchain and its application on the revenue side of the business, meaning advertising, marketing, sales, commerce, and customer service, post-purchase customer service, we think about a couple of things. One is kind of the activities that the firm undergoes with media buying and getting transparency and getting out bad actors in the space, right? So systems that can handle the rate and pace of blockchain recorded programmatic advertising don't exist yet. They're in early stages, and they're really not ready to go at volume. I mean, the people who I'm sure who would most benefit from having those types of technologies, you know, the big ad players, Facebook, Google, Amazon, really haven't made any big announcements there yet. So we still see some experimentation. The engagement with individuals, so kind of what we call shopper engagement, and also B2B on the B2B side, those elements where you want to gain trust and auditability and give some control back to the user over their own data may involve some flavor of blockchain, right? So we think some regulations will continue to evolve around personal data, personal information, and how you grant people access to your data, given some political entities believe that data about you belongs to you, and some political entities believe that information belongs ultimately to the state. So we have a wide global divergence of opinion around who owns what, but blockchain could certainly help some areas like the EU where they believe that the individual owns their personal data, enact more control over that. And I think that applies across the whole ecosystem about what you provide access to and what you own, and seeing the access of who buys your data and who uses it for what, and how it gets, how you sell off those bits and pieces will become important. Now that's about your personal information. All the information about the devices that you use, the cars you drive, all the information from the engine in your car. Are you a good driver or a bad driver? How you ride your bicycle, how often do you take walks, even how often do you get up and walk around the office are going to be tracked by devices. And all kinds of devices are going to be embedded in your life. So we have a lot of access to that, and really no control mechanisms about what happens once you kind of give that information to past the primary provider other than an end user agreement. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to lose control over that. And again, blockchain is one mechanism for control over that. I think there's probably regulation and some other things that can step up for that. So this is another example of big shifts in the data, and in this case, kind of more about data governance as we go forward. A lot of opportunity for technical innovation in this space. I don't know that I would advocate inventing a technology that is in search of a problem, but as people become more aware of how much information they're giving away just by moving around and what that implies to them, I think there will be some responses that will develop. Good opportunity to explore from a management consulting, from an entrepreneurial point of view as well. So I think that wraps up our webinar today. Kelly, do you have any final words?
Well, thank you all for joining the webinar, and please feel free to reach out to anyone on the team with any follow-up questions. If you have a few moments, please make sure to fill out the survey on your screen and let us know what topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. A replay of the version of the webcast will be available after the event, which you'll get through the email, as well as a link to register and view other TBR webinars. Make sure to join us on Wednesday, June 6th for Making Sure the Price is Right, How Using Research Can Take the Guesswork Out of Pricing New ICT Products and Services. Thanks again for joining, and have a great day.